The story you are about to hear is true. Some locations and names are not disclosed or have been changed to protect the innocent. This happened to me. What would you do? I'm a senior in high school. Having such a wonderful time, school has never been better. Losing in the state semifinals in the state of Louisiana in basketball. And the thing is, now you have all these colleges showing interest in me. During regular season, I received a letter. My first school of interest that showed interest in me was Washington State University, part of the Pac-12 conference on the West Coast. And not just that, after season, I had the legendary Grambling State University head coach, Fred Hobdy, that came to my home to recruit me. I was so excited knowing that a legendary coach came to my home wanting me to play basketball for Grambling State University. And the thing about it is, everybody in the neighborhood was aware that Coach Hobdy was there. And what a wonderful feeling that was. But then I got my first recruiting trip, and that was at Sam Houston State University. And you talking about having such a wonderful time. And the coaches pull out all the stops and their techniques and introducing you to people and trying to get you to come to their school. And not just that, showing you some of the prettiest young adult girls on campus, hoping that would wow and entice you to come to their university. But the great thing of all was, I had my first airplane experience. Never before had I ever ridden in an airplane. And this was at a time when your large passenger jets were taking over from the large airplanes. But on this day, in the city of Houston, I got to take my first flight. And I must admit, I was a little bit edgy there. Fright was in me a little bit, even though I was happy to be able to have my first flight. But that thought was there as to, what if something happened in the sky? What if? But of course, I was so excited just to be able to have that first flight so I can be able to go home and tell all the boys and girls about my experience. And the thing is, it was on a 50-passenger airplane. Now, these planes were large, with 4 large propellers. And I remember, as that plane was going down the runway, and I'm sitting near the window so I can see everything. And as it elevated and went off higher and higher, and the wheels were no longer on the ground, I must admit, that was the most unusual feeling I ever experienced. What about you? What was your first flight like? Did it seem unreal that, in a sense, almost like you were in a roller coaster in a small sense? Because now you had nothing that you could touch ground on. Now here we are, flying way above the clouds. All the other passengers are being normal, eating and drinking. You know, they had those little small bottles of alcohol, and that's what they were doing. Me, myself, I'm sitting tight, looking out of the window, sharing this experience because it was so surreal. Now here I am trying to relax and enjoy this experience, to be able to have something to tell everybody when I get back home. But suddenly, the captain came over the intercom, and he said that we lost an engine. Now keep in mind, you have a 4-propeller airplane, large plane, almost like the size of the jets. And he comes over the intercom and tells everyone to not be alarmed, but we have lost one of the engines. Now, fright, fear comes over me as I'm looking out of the window, looking below the clouds, and I'm thinking, what if this is it? Losing an engine. In today's time, if you lose an engine in a jet, you can almost call that doomsday. But on this day, one of the engines was lost. Now, I didn't know any better. Not at that time. I'm thinking if you lost an engine, this is it. And the thing is, all I could do was pray to God. That's all I had. Imagine this. When you're in such a helpless situation and you have no control over anything, what can you do? When there's a possibility of faced with life and death, what can you do? I did the only thing that I knew that I had control of, and that was pray. And I prayed to my God, and I asked him for his hedge of protection, and I asked him to let us land this plane safely, and that's exactly what happened. The plane landed in the city of Beaumont, Texas. And the thing is, they said we were going to have to get off this plane and transfer to another plane. Now, I'm back on the ground from my first flight. That was enough of an experience for me. But now, he's talking about getting off this plane and getting on another one. Now, the thing is, I have some options here. Do I follow the instructions and get on this other plane in which the college had paid for my airplane ticket? Or do I call someone and have them come and pick me up? Because I was terrified in the skies and not wanting to get on this plane anymore. So what would you do? Would you get on that plane, your first flight, and experiencing terror in the sky? Or would you call someone and have them come and pick you up because you would rather take your chances on the ground through traffic than in the sky? So what would you do? Now here I am, faced with a dilemma. What do I do? I know my plane ticket is paid for. We had engine trouble in the sky. We landed in Beaumont, and now we're getting back on another plane that looked identical to the one we just got off of. Now I'm thinking, I don't want to get on this plane. But what I did do, I just prayed to God, and I got back on the plane. Got off one plane that had engine trouble and got on another plane that looked just like the one I got off of. It was identical. And once we got back in the sky, riding way above the clouds, and my first flight, it was not enjoyable because all I could think about was crashing. So you can imagine, for the next few hours, I was in misery. My first flight ever. And being recruited for a college, and who took the time out to impress me by flying me back on an airplane. And here I am, I'm terrified to death, thinking, what if this plane go down? Not just that, I'm thinking as well, what if this is the same plane? All sorts of thoughts was running through my head. And then as we approached the city of Monroe, and maybe probably 1,000 feet in the air from the ground, and I'm saying to myself, it can crash now. I'm close enough to the ground. But knowing that too could also kill you. But that was my experience. The first time I ever flew was being recruited by a university. And boy, you talking, that trip in itself was wonderful. But it ended with fear in the skies. But I did get comfort in knowing that I had time to do nothing but talk to God, and basically repenting, continually asking for forgiveness, asking for his hedge of protection to save us, not let this plane go down, but allow us to land safely at my destination. And that's what happened. We landed safely, and it gave me a story to tell. A story such as this. A story of sharing my recruiting experience and the terror that I felt in the sky. But God is good, isn't he? I say yes, he is.